we are paying roughly 10 million euros every week on ransomware sums. Hey, download our app to get 20% off your next order, right? Show me how many people would say no to that, right? 80% of all phishing websites are specifically designed for mobile devices.
Cześć, to jest Integrity TV
Łukasz Kopeć
i Łukasz Pietrzak z Integrity Partners. Rozpoczynamy niebezpieczne rozmowy.
czyli to jest seria wywiadów o 4 obszarach: cyber security, cloud, AI i identity security. Koniecznie subskrybujcie nasz kanał.
Dokładnie. Witamy Was w noworocznym odcinku i w związku z tym mamy dla Was niespodziankę. Tym razem odcinek w języku angielskim. Jeżeli potrzebujecie, możecie zmienić napisy w ustawieniach YouTube'a na język polski lub angielski, zależnie od tego, jakiego potrzebujecie. A dziś u nas.
iPhone jest bezpieczny, prawda czy fałsz?
Cyberszpiedzy kochają telefony, czy na pewno?
Niezabezpieczona sieć Wi-Fi, czy to najlepsza metoda na kradzież danych?
A naszym gościem jest dzisiaj Yang Gyun Ro. Dzień dobry.
Dzień dobry.
Dzień dobry.
Cześć.
Czyli ekspert z firmy Zimperium. Nice to have you in our studio. Nice to have you.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be in Warsaw.
Long trip. Where are you living now?
I'm from Berlin, so it was an okay drive. It was a nice drive, actually. It was kind of long, but very nice drive.
Could you please tell us some 2-3 words about your position right now, what you're doing in Zimperium?
At Zimperium, I'm a sales engineer, so I help a larger team of account executives, of marketing people, of other sales activity roles to facilitate sales, basically to transport knowledge to a certain customer base, to sync with their technical teams, to enable them to test our solution properly before they come to a buying decision. So essentially, I'm a technical resource that gets utilized in different ways to help customers or prospects to understand security better, because we feel that there is a certain misconception. There are certain irritations around security, right? So and a lot of times people have a very vague understanding of the term security, right? We focus on purely mobile security, and in that endeavor, I help prospects and customers to increase their knowledge base.
Okay.
And what are your connections to Poland?
Obviously, Poland is a very key market for us as a company, right? It's the fastest growing economy in Europe. It is, I would say, the most educated customer base across Europe. But also for me personally, I have personal ties to the country. My fiancée is from Poland, from the great city of Torun. So I enjoy every moment that I get here.
We have pierniki in our studio, so after the interview it will be pierniki feast. Yes.
It has to be Turunska pierniki though, because everything else doesn't count.
Okay.
Okay, so we are prepared. Lucas, we can start with safe warm-up.
Yes, safe warm-up is just a couple question statement, and you should ask. You should answer yes or no. Are you agree with the statement or not?
Okay, excellent.
Everything clear?
Yes.
Okay, we can start. I own an iPhone, so I don't need to worry about cybersecurity.
It's a no. Can I elaborate on the question?
A little bit.
A little bit.
So as a sales engineer, of course, I do have to do a lot of test cases. I have to do a lot of simulations for my customers. So I do own both Android and iOS. But I guess we will elaborate more on why a device would be considered secure or not secure. So to answer your question, I do own an iPhone, but not because it's secure.
Okay. Not every public network is unsafe.
Not every public network is unsafe. Yes, that statement is true.
Okay, systems protecting mobile devices track their users.
I can only speak for our solutions, and that's a no.
Every app on Google Play, Apple Store is safe.
No.
I protect my smartphone with a PIN code, and that's enough.
Yes, I do protect my device with a PIN code, but no, it's not enough.
A cyber criminal gains no benefits with hacking my smartphone.
No. Well, they do gain benefits, so the statement is not true.
Okay, so let's start with a big question. There's a massive debate between Apple users and mainly the rest of the world. You know what I'm talking about. So is iOS better operating system than Android or
safer?
Or safer, yes. Is it safer?
So from a safety perspective, neither operating system is better than the other. Both operating systems are very robust operating systems. In the past, I would say, look back 5 years ago, right? Apple had or iOS had the benefit of being a very closed environment, and it wasn't necessarily that it was much safer than Android, but think of it from a hacker perspective, right? If you invest a lot of time and effort to build a malware, an exploit, you want that exploit to reach the largest number of possible victims, right? With iOS, though, the user base was much smaller than Android, so it makes sense for bad actors or malware developers to target Android devices because they can reach a much larger user base. That was 5 years ago. These days, both Android or the Android ecosystem, as well as Apple for iOS, are investing millions of dollars every year to increase their security, or basically to keep up with latest technology trends to make sure their platforms are safe. So from that perspective, both platforms are very safe. The problem is that with your mobile device, it's not just the platform that you have to consider in terms of security, because Apple can invest a lot of money in building a very secure platform, as well as Google is doing. But your mobile devices are very mobile, so you can connect to public networks, open networks, right? You can download applications these days on both platforms from third-party app stores. You can sideload applications. You might be victim to a phishing attack, right? You click on a phishing link. These are factors that the platform manufacturers cannot affect, right? They can't control where you click on, which applications you install, which networks you connect to. So from that perspective, the platform manufacturers can only do so much. But what they can do, they do very well, both the Android ecosystem as well as Apple for iOS.
So it's not about operating system, but it's about end users.
Yes. So security has to be looked at more comprehensively, right? You have to look at it as a bigger thing. If you break it down, if you want to look at it from a very easy analogy, imagine you have a house and you want to secure your house. You can build a very huge fence around it, but then maybe someone is gonna dig a tunnel under that fence and still gets to your house, right? Maybe someone is talking to your children and gives them candy so that they give the stranger their keys and then they can get through the fence, right? So these are things to consider with the safety of your house. Maybe you get a big dog, right? Or something like that. So there are different factors that you have to consider when it comes to security.
A teraz pytanie do was. Z jakich smartfonów korzystacie? Napiszcie proszę teraz w komentarzu. Możecie zapauzować teraz i na spokojnie napisać, i w jaki sposób je zabezpieczacie. Zostańcie z nami do końca, bo Young ma dla was kilka porad, w jaki sposób skutecznie te urządzenia zabezpieczyć.
Będą protipy. Okay, so how do you ensure that your smartphone is safe?
Me personally, so it's also a very difficult question because obviously there's different user personas, right? Even pretty much every one of your audience probably has the same situation. There's you as a private user, right? And then there's you as a corporate user. If you are in a corporate environment, if your employer gives you a phone, or if you get a work device, basically, right? Companies can buy solutions that, enterprise solutions essentially, such as, for example, the Zimperium mobile threat detection. That comes with a lot of utility, where the end user doesn't have to do much, right? It's all administered by your IT department. They know very well what are the latest technology trends. They know how to use their tools best. As a private user, it's very difficult to keep up with all these technological news, right? To make sure that you read every release note of your operating system, right? To understand where maybe some weaknesses in the platform might exist, or analyze every application by yourself. You don't have the resources as a private user. So when it comes to how can you, as your audience, secure your device better, then I would say, as a private user, educate yourself, right? Be aware of what you're using and what you're using it for, right? The purposes. For example, we see a certain trend in enterprise mobility. So from a corporate perspective, where the lines between personal and corporate usage are very unclear, right? They're merging, or they're kind of merging with each other. In a lot of cases, the company says, yeah, we want to use, I don't know, two-factor authentication, for example, right? We heard about zero trust, and we want to use a second factor for you guys to authenticate against your email account. All right, great. But then if your second factor is an app, and it has to be installed on a mobile device, but your company doesn't give you a phone, then ultimately you're installing that application on your private device. And that moment, it becomes a corporate device, right? But from a corporate perspective, the company still says, well, it's your device. Do with it whatever you see fit. It's not my problem, right? So these lines kind of get very blurry. Companies, I would definitely recommend you to do your research, look into the market. There are very good solutions out there. Obviously, I would recommend to use Zimperium Mobile Threat Defense. But as a private user, understand what you're using your devices for and what you are using, right? Maybe inform yourself about OS updates, right? Make sure that you keep your operating system up to date. It sounds very simple, but there's so much behind that, because operating system manufacturers, both Apple and Google, invest so much money in finding vulnerabilities in the operating system, and they invest a lot of time and effort to fix these weaknesses, and they roll it out through security patches. Now the tools are already available, but so many people get annoyed, and me personally too, right? I see, oh, there's an update available, but I'm in the middle of something. I'm traveling, I'm in a meeting. I don't want to install an update right now. Maybe I don't have enough battery left to get through the day, right? So please, not now, right? And then you come home, you forget about it. And so we push these updates away from us, right? So make sure to keep your devices up to date. And the device is just one part, as we discussed, right? Application updates is a whole another thing, right? Because most people don't really understand even how many applications you have on your device, right? That's why I meant when I said make sure to understand what you're using your device for. Oftentimes, if I'm right now in the middle of switching devices, and I look at my device, my old device, and trying to understand, okay, which applications do I actually need on a new device? And I look at my old device and see, what is this application, right? Why did I install that? What is this for? But these applications all come with their own code, right? They're built with SDKs, with open source libraries. They can contain weaknesses and vulnerabilities that you might not be aware of, right? So make sure to keep your updates updated, your applications updated, and make sure to maybe remove applications that you don't need, right? Applications take a lot of permissions.
We will get to the permissions,
right.
application, everything.
Excellent.
I see you are a brilliant expert. You know the stuff. I know that, but most people and businesses care so little about mobile security device, right? Why is it, I don't know, laziness, ignorance, or maybe mobile security is still a niche in the cybersecurity world?
There are different factors, right? Multiple factors that come together here. One big factor I would say is that companies, they have been kind of not investing in security for so long that right now they don't know where to begin with. Right? Imagine, let's come back to the analogy with the house. Imagine you build a house, you didn't do any protection. You don't have a fence, you don't have a dog, you don't even have a door with a lock, right? Where do I start, right? If you have a huge list of tasks, it's overwhelming. You don't know where to start. That's one factor. The second factor is security is always a kind of insurance thing, right? It doesn't increase your productivity necessarily. It doesn't make your product better to sell to more customers, right? It doesn't make your coworkers faster or something like that. So it's an operating cost that doesn't directly translate into higher revenues, right? So that's another factor. And then the third aspect I would say is that very few people understand the risk, right? They say, oh, it's just a mobile device, right? It's how bad can it be? Who would want to attack me, right? But the real question that companies should ask themselves is, what happens if the device is not working anymore? Right. Let's say you are a logistics company and you rely on your mobile devices to scan QR codes or something, right? To know which parcels has been delivered and whatnot. In that case, the mobile device becomes mission critical. If the device breaks, your entire workflow, your entire value chain breaks, right? So at that point, companies need to understand their risk exposure through mobile devices.
Mm-hmm. So maybe it is a good way to learn about it. About when we say about the examples, when we show the examples. So could you please tell us something about the major attack, major breach, which started with a smartphone?
Yeah, I mean, there are multiple examples that start with a smartphone because if you think from an attacker's perspective, right, an attacker is always going to choose the weakest link, right, the path of least resistance. I don't want to, dig a tunnel into your server room and then do some Mission Impossible kind of action scene just to get to your data, right? Ideally, I just want to, compromise a coworker of yours that is failing to install the updates or something, right? Or that is not aware enough to click on a phishing link that I sent him, and that way I can penetrate your infrastructure. There have been many cases. One probably one of the most popular ones over the last 18 months was the breach with Uber. Uber, the business concept I think is known, right? Has many drivers, independent contractors basically that drive for the company. And a attacker was sending them phishing links, basically, right? They overwhelmed them with login requests, basically saying, "Hey guys, we changed something in our IT infrastructure. Please log in to the app so that you can gain access to the platform, or something like that." And then the link to the login was a phishing link, right? So then when a user clicked on it, they were sent to a phishing resource, and then from there, the attacker could steal their credentials. With those credentials, they then had the means to go further into the Uber infrastructure to then steal very critical data. And here, the point is not that, maybe Uber was unsafe or something like that. I'm sure they spend a lot of money and effort in securing their infrastructure. The problem here is the weakest link, right? You have so many drivers that use so many unmanaged devices that Uber didn't have visibility. How many devices are out there? What is the state of these devices, right? Are they up to date? Are they maybe rooted devices or jailbroken devices? What third-party applications are on those devices that might compromise the device further? Those kind of things. And ultimately, it was a phishing link that started everything, right? I don't know if we're going to talk about phishing specifically later on, but phishing is so easy these days for adversaries to set up. Zimperium does its own research, right? We provide research to the public for education. Every year we release our global mobile threat report, and in our latest mobile threat report, we found that 80% of all phishing websites are specifically designed for mobile devices because of the way how we consume information on mobile devices, right? If you look at your phone, the URL field is very short, right? You can't really see what is written in the URL. So it's very easy to hide unauthentic websites or web content. All you need is basically a little bit of HTML knowledge. You don't even need that these days, right? You can ask an AI, hey, build me a website that looks like DHL or Facebook or something like that. Very, very easy, right?
Put a QR code and print it and put it somewhere public.
Exactly.
Yeah. There's so many variations of phishing, right? There's QR code phishing. Recently, it was literally a few days ago, I got a phone call from a number in the USA, and I take the call, and then it was a automated voice, right? A robotic voice saying, "Hey, I want to talk to you about work. Please add me on WhatsApp."
That was Łukasz. with this pierniki, yeah. Just to clarify the whole concept of MTD, please tell us, because this is one of the main topic on our episode. What is MTD? Could you please describe the?
All right, so MTD stands for Mobile Threat Defense, and what it is essentially is it's a security solution specifically designed for mobile devices. The reason being is mobile operating systems or mobile platforms are fundamentally different from your laptop or your desktop PC, right? The way the operating system is built, and also the way the platform is used by the end users, right? A laptop you usually use for work, right? It has a specific purpose, and you can manage a lot of things around the periphery of that laptop. With mobile devices, it's not that easy, right? You don't have that much control into, on the kernel level, for example, through administrative tools. With mobile operating systems, it's very, very difficult to get on a root level or to gain so-called device administrative access on your mobile device. So we make an effort to design security that is providing the same value as for laptops and traditional endpoints, but accounting for the unique aspects of a mobile operating system. So to answer your question, what it does is we create visibility across the four major attack vectors, which are device, network, application, and phishing. Right? These are considered attack vectors, basically directions from where attackers can come. Right, and in these within these attack vectors, there are many techniques and tactics that the attackers can utilize. But from our perspective, if you want to properly secure your device, you need to have visibility across the threat exposure of your device. And you can only do that if you cover all attack vectors and not just one specific one, right? That goes back to our initial conversation, which device is more safe, Android or iOS. You can't determine the safety of the entire device or the entire platform by just looking at one attack vector. You have to look at everything.
You mentioned the applications. Right, let's go back to them. Before our interview, I was talking about coffee in our studio here. And I'm sure that I will get an advertisement on my Facebook account about, freshly ground Colombian coffee or something like that.
I'm counting on that, yeah.
Yes. So is that how Meta and Google works? Are they, eavesdropping on us using our phones?
So again, right, you have to understand who you're dealing with, right? The counterparty. Google and Meta, if you listen to their earnings calls, right? These are publicly listed companies. They do earnings calls every quarter. The majority of their revenue comes from advertisement sales, right? That their business model is to sell advertisement. And from that perspective, what they're doing is increasing the quality of their product by targeting or by being more precise with the advertisement they target to you. So let's say you want to talk about coffee, you're a passionate coffee drinker, then most likely, you don't like Wódeczka for breakfast, okay? So if Facebook hears that, right, they know, okay, so for Łukasz, I'm going to show coffee instead of Wódeczka advertisement.
But
right?
we have two Łukashes.
So from their perspective, they're doing actually a good job in improving their product.
Good job, but a little bit scary, I must
Absolutely, 100%, yeah. And a lot has to do with privacy, right? We touched it on this point briefly earlier ago. Very few people know the exact numbers of applications they have installed on their devices. Very few people, even fewer people, understand the permissions they grant to applications when you install them, right? And this is very interesting behavior to witness when you are in a corporate environment, right? Let's say you take your personal device for work purposes as well, and then your work IT says, hey guys, we're going to roll out a new software solution. You have to install this app, right? You install the app, and then the app is asking, hey, can I get access to your location? And you ask yourself, why does the app need access to my location, right? Why does my employer need to know where I am? And you're very suspicious about that. However, when you install, I don't know, a dating app, you have personal motivation, right? Then you say, yeah, sure, take all my take all my data, take all the permissions you want. I just want to use it, right? So it's very interesting to witness or to observe this different user behavior. But in this context, right, very few users really sit down and think, hey, why does this application really need these and these permissions, right? Let's say a torch, right? You want just a light on your phone. Back in the days when cameras were not that smart, you had to download an application for that, right? And the application suddenly needs, I don't know, location permissions or access to your phone book. Why? I just need the torch, right?
So can we say that if we turn it off, we are 100% secure about listening to us?
Okay, so if you're just asking about privacy, right? Being aware of the permissions that you grant and being conscientious to say, okay, maybe I want to use WhatsApp, but I don't want WhatsApp to have access to my storage or to my location. That's perfectly fine, right? You still can utilize the application or the core functionality, communicating to other people, but you protect your privacy, right? You don't share as much data with the application. I would say, to answer your question specifically, yes, that increases your privacy, absolutely, but it's very difficult to keep track of, because with every update that you install, the application will ask you again. Every time that you use the application might ask you, hey, Łukasz, why don't you give me location access, right? Please.
So it's more like lack of awareness that we are giving so many permissions to the apps.
I would say it is a lack of awareness that most people don't really understand what is tied behind it, right? And to be honest, it's very difficult to keep track of that, right? Because in Android's case, for example, it's every now and then Google optimizes its operating system, and then the permission is tied to certain APIs on the operating system, right? So for example, I don't know, 4 generations ago with Android 10 or so, no, actually Android 9, there was one permission that you could give, permission to storage, and that was fine. You had access to the entire storage. Now it's more granular. Now you can grant permissions to photos, to audios, to videos, those kind of things, right? So you can say very specifically, okay, I want this application to be able to access my photos, but not my audio or not my video. It's very difficult to keep track of all these new updates. You would have to constantly read release notes or attend the conferences where Google or Apple are talking about these new features in operating systems. And it is overwhelming, of course. If your day-to-day if your focus is somewhere completely else, right? Then, and you're not a tech person, right? The technology fan, and it is difficult to keep track of.
We were talking about the security, we were talking about the privacy, but how about the networks? We have now 5G. I know many people concerned about it. And on the horizon, there is a 6G. Yeah. How about it? Do we have to worry about something?
Again, it's difficult, right? Because obviously you need it as an infrastructure. You need mobile networks to connect, because your mobile devices, the whole point of the mobile device is to have connectivity everywhere from the go. So it's a necessary evil, if you want to say, but do you have to be conscientious about the risk? I would say absolutely, right? In our research, we've seen cases in certain regions of the world where adversaries or bad actors have been working together with the service providers, with the mobile network providers, to, for example, to hide their command and control servers. Usually, these command and control servers from which an attack originates are they get detected at some point, right? And then they would have to move the server or start from scratch and whatnot. With the help of that network provider, they could move them around with the DNS without too much effort, right? It was very easy to hide the command and control server. So there is a certain risk that comes from mobile networks. But again, it goes back to what we said initially. Be aware of it, right? Understand it is definitely possible to do something bad to you through it, but create visibility around it. I know for a private person, for a private user, it's very difficult to do that, but for companies, definitely look into mobile threat defense solutions to create visibility in that regard, right? MTD solutions are very capable to analyze network behavior, right? I don't know, is there maybe some man in the middle happening, right? Is someone listening into your conversations? Is there an SSL inspection, right? So basically, is an encrypted package or encrypted information sent to you that is then been inspected and re-encrypted to you, right? These kind of things, MTD solutions are very good at picking up. So for companies, I would recommend definitely create visibility around that.
Okay, many people are working remotely with their pajamas, with a coffee mug with one hand and smartphone with the other hand. Any tips for companies how to protect these devices and the employee who are working like that?
Yeah, so obviously for employees, right, in a company context, our recommendation is always to use a combination between a MTD solution, a mobile threat defense solution, as well as a MDM, which is a mobile device management solution. Most companies these days have a mobile device management solution in place, and most mobile device management solution providers advertise themselves as also security providers. The problem is that a MDM can only go so far, right? They don't have the technology, and quite frankly, it's also not within the scope of them. It's basically saying if you have a large house, right, an office building, and you have a janitor, a facility manager, and a security company, right? You wouldn't go to the janitor and say, "Hey, Mr. Janitor, please make sure that the estate is also secure, right? Make sure that you install cameras and sensors and those kind of things." So these are two different areas of competency, and together, both of them work very well. We see that in the field, right? Customers that use both MTD and MDM solutions, they benefit the most. They have the most robust, most scalable security solutions. The reason being is, through the MTD solution, right, through the mobile threat detection, you can set up policies to basically determine how to or what to do when you detect a certain threat. Let's say, for example, your employer doesn't have a device pin on their device. It's not a big deal, right? However, it's a very high security risk. But does it really justify to wipe the device? Probably not, right? It can be fixed very easily. So through MTD, you can set up a policy that says if a device user doesn't have a PIN, then we want to notify the user, right? Or we want to explain why a device PIN is useful. Now, for other things that require a lot more automation, let's say you detect a man-in-the-middle attack, right? A private user might not be able to understand what it is. Let's say you have someone in sales that doesn't really understand the technology that well. For those kind of colleagues, ideally, we have an MDM in place that gets the information from the MTD and then can action certain policies, right? For example, disconnect from the Wi-Fi or disconnect from that network, right? If we detect it on the mobile network.
Mm-hmm. So what are the primary challenges to implement the MTD?
Primary challenges, I would say, are very limited. It depends on what you qualify as challenge, right? I think the biggest challenge with rolling out an MTD solution is always user acceptance, because there's a misconception that people say, "Oh, there's a security solution. Why is my employer spying on me, right? Why do they want to see where I am or which applications I use or something like that?" But that's not the case. An MTD solution does not usually, at least our solution, right, does not process personally identifiable information. We look at behavior of device without looking at who is the user, right? So we only look at device components. How do they behave? Is there maybe a malware that is trying to get permissions that an application on that level should not have? But that is completely detached from the user, right? We don't know the user name. We don't know the user persona or profile or something like that. So this is a huge misconception, right, around privacy. So I'd say that is one of the biggest challenges. Other than that, a certain smoothness or a seamless rollout, right, is also very important for most customers. Most customers don't want the end user to be involved, right? If the end user has to download the app, I don't know, activate the app through a login or something like that, and then grant permissions, is very annoying. There's a lot of steps that can go wrong. So a certain amount of seamless deployment or so-called zero-touch deployment is always favored by by companies or customers, and that is something that a lot of vendors struggle with, right? But obviously, also for that we have different solutions.
Okay, if a company has a mobile security system to protect mobile devices, how you measure if it's working in this company?
Yeah, it's a very good question, right? Because you can advertise security as very robust, very secure, but then you have to wait for, I don't know, a hacker to attack you. At Zimperium, we have a list of test cases, we call them, right? So basically hacking scenarios where we simulate entire kill chains to simulate threats, right? We recently designed a threat simulation platform for customers to use in their own testing. So in the past, we would do technical workshops with the customer, mostly also to educate the customer, right, about different attack vectors, different techniques that attackers or adversaries use in combination. But like I said, recently we designed a platform, an online platform, basically a website where the customer can test certain scenarios, right? Let's say download a malware, or for iOS devices, for example, simulate a malicious shortcut. We explain how to use or how to test certain phishing protection. Those kind of things.
During our technological breakfast, you show me how hackers can easily get into our phones using unsecure Wi-Fi network, and it's so easy that they can take control of, I don't know, my Gmail account, my banking account, everything.
I saw also some conversations on WhatsApp. The whole device is connected to that public.
Yeah, correct. So
how it's possible?
What we showed at the Integrity Business Breakfast was a full kill chain, right? It started with a rogue network. Basically, I used used a Wi-Fi dongle, right? It's not very powerful. I would have to have very close. I would need to be in close proximity to the device. But imagine you are, let's say, on a train or in a coffee shop, right? Then you have a range of maybe 3 to 5 meters, and then you just hope that someone is looking for free Wi-Fi. The beauty of this is that the danger of it, right, is that you can name your Wi-Fi whatever you want. You can name it Starbucks Wi-Fi or free airport Wi-Fi, those kind of things. And unfortunately, human behavior is that free is always good, right? And not only is it human behavior, but also mobile devices are designed in a way where oftentimes they're actively trying to find connections. So let's say you switch off your Wi-Fi, right? In some operating system versions, some processes are trying to look for a Wi-Fi connection or to some form of a network connection because they work better if they are online, right? So they will always, even if you switch it off, they will, the components, the processes will try to find a network connection. So what we did was we set up a Wi-Fi network and waited for my test device to connect. Obviously, we didn't have to wait long. And then within that network, what we did was basically a URL forwarding, right? In our test case, I think we used a website like airport.de or something like that, right? Or airport.com. And then that website would then, or that request would then be redirected to my phishing server. And then I would show my phishing website. And then with phishing, the danger of it is that adversaries are very, very smart, and they use very dangerous tools to design very good phishing content, right? Phishing is basically addressing human nature, and that could mean anything in any context. So let's say you're at a coffee shop. Let's say you're at Starbucks, right? A phishing website could say, hey, download our app to get 20% off your next order, right? Show me how many people would say no to that, right? Probably more would say yes to no. Exactly, tempting. Very, very tempting. During COVID, there was a trend where restaurants would say, instead of printing menus, just scan the QR code and then you have the menu as a website and then you can order from there, right? You can pay through that. Very convenient, but also it was yet another avenue for phishing attackers or for phishing attacks to be successful. All you need is to switch out the QR code and then you can guide people to your phishing website. So that's what we did at the Integrity Business Breakfast. And then from the phishing website, we downloaded the malware to the device, and that malware granted us root access to the device. And then once we had root access, we then were able to take control of it.
In every episode, Łukasz, I think that we are talking about the phishing, and what you have said that can we say that everything starts with a phishing, or can we say that or maybe how MTD solutions can secure us? Because after hearing your statements, you said that someone has to click on something, someone has to go inside the link, and it starts with thinking of a person, yeah? So it starts from us, yeah?
Absolutely, yeah. So to answer your first question, yes, our latest research showed that most of the attacks start with the phishing, with some form of phishing. That's the unfortunate truth. If you look at phishing statistics from, for example, the Anti-Phishing Working Group, then you can see there's a certain trend since the beginning of this year that is declining. So we see a declining trend in phishing detection or in detected phishing attacks, which is, the first instinct would say it's a good thing, right? We see fewer and fewer phishing websites. The problem is if you then look at the details of the statistics, the detections went down, but the damages, so basically the phishing campaigns, the phishing, the companies that were phished, right? The phishing emails that were sent out was consistently the same. So basically what that statistic tells us is our detection capability as a security community is getting weaker, or the adversaries are getting better at hiding it. right? Our research showed that, for example, for the past 2 years, more and more phishing websites, we estimate around 70-80% of phishing websites these days use encryption.
Maybe because of AI.
Exactly, because it's extremely easy. So from the time a website gets hosted to the issuance of a SSL certificate, it only takes 3 hours on average. And the average phishing website is only online for about 7 days, right? So basically they're moving around these phishing websites constantly to evade detection. And there's even services around that, right? If you look at criminal report statistics, the German Federal Police, for example, detected a certain underground economy where a lot of the underground economy consists of services to hide from detection, right? But then to answer your second question, how can you protect against that? The best way is obviously to have a not just phishing protection on your device, but a proper web content analysis that's happening on your device. We, or Zimperium, designs classifiers for that to determine if a web content might be malicious or what kind of danger originates from that web content. But then also there is public knowledge, right? There are public databases that collect DNS of phishing websites or the names of phishing websites. The problem with these deterministic protections is that you're always a step behind, right? You need to wait for someone to identify it as phishing. And then, like I said, the phishing websites are around for 7 days on average. So they move on very quickly. And that's why we believe you need both. You need the deterministic one, the database that informs you of the phishing content that has already been detected, but also improve your own technology to determine if a web content might be dangerous or not.
What kind of mobile devices have members of the German parliament?
It's actually a very funny thing. The German, for some reason, German politicians have a tendency to go for iOS devices. My personal impression is just because they're more expensive, they look nicer, right? They come with the promise of a nicer user experience.
They have nice camera.
Exactly. I can't speak for the preference, right? Why that is, it's just an observation.
Okay, so how about the IoT devices? How about the implementation of this MTD?
So MTD as mobile threat defense focuses on mobile platforms such as Android, iOS, and Chrome OS. IoT is kind of out of scope with that. So the problem with IoT that I see at the moment is that the IoT market is very fragmented, right? There's no standard within or amongst IoT vendors. Every IoT vendor basically comes up with their own protocol to manage your devices or to control your devices, and it's a pain, right? If you just look at your own home, for example, right? You have light bulbs, maybe you have a smart washing machine or a smart fridge, right? Every vendor uses their own protocol, and for every device type, you need a dedicated connector, right? You need a dedicated platform to manage them. It's pretty annoying, but from that perspective, it's very, very difficult to come up with security standards that would apply across IoT. But to answer your question, IoT is out of scope for mobile threat defense.
Okay, and for our audience, and 5-6 best practices, tips, how to secure our mobile devices?
Yeah, it's a very good question, right? So at Zimperium, we like to recommend something that we call the 5 principles of a mobile-first security strategy. Principle 1 would be to to prioritize risk at the edge, right? To understand what you need to secure. We call it prioritize risk at the edge because we come from a primary corporate perspective, and we notice that most companies they prioritize infrastructure or perimeter defense, right? They put a lot of security solutions on your laptop, in the server environments, which is obviously good, right? It's a right thing to do. But mobile devices have become such a crucial part of our work life, right? Of our value chains, that we have to include them in our security considerations. So that's why we say principle number one would be prioritize security at the or risk at the edge. Principle number two would be to create visibility, create as much visibility as possible, right? Understand your threat exposure. If you don't know what the risks are, if you don't know what dangers are waiting out there for you, then it's very difficult to protect against them, right? So you need to understand what is the current risk exposure, what is the current threat landscape for your user base, for your mobile devices. So that means understand how many devices do you have in your company, right? It sounds benign, but so many companies, when I talk to them and I ask them, so how many devices do you have? Most companies don't even know that, right? Because maybe some remote department is buying their own devices, and they get access to corporate resources, right? They access the company servers, but the IT doesn't really know how many specifically. Then understand operating system, which operating system versions are installed on your devices, which devices might be out of date or end of life. The devices might still work, but the operating system is so old that it's not feasible for corporate purposes anymore, right? Especially in rugged device environments or on purpose-built devices. So basically in hand scanners or those kind of device types, we see a lot of cases where there's still Android 6 devices out there, right? We're currently already on Android 14. There have been many zero-day vulnerabilities already fixed. But if you're still on Android 6, then you're very much exposed to these threats, right? That are by now public knowledge. So yeah, hygiene across operating system versions. Understand the applications that you have installed on your devices, especially for companies. This is very important. We spoke about this in a private context, right? If you install a social media app and the social media app is listening to you to tailor advertisements for you.
Łukasz just uninstalled the dating.
Yes, no more.
For companies, it's so important to understand what applications and also in what versions of the application they are on devices, right? Because through the MDM, you can say which application gets installed and which is blacklisted, for example. But based on what data do you do that, right? You can analyze applications to understand the security risks, the privacy risks. With our solution, we analyze where the application is connecting to, for example, which servers, IP addresses, which countries, those kind of things. Which frameworks are used in those applications. Let's say, for example, you have a productivity application that is advertising itself as AI-driven, and it's utilizing a language model, right? You don't know which language model is being utilized, and imagine there has been a vulnerability, right? Someone detects a vulnerability in the ChatGPT SDK, right? And this application might use the ChatGPT SDK. If you don't know which frameworks are utilized in that application, you might put your entire company at risk. Especially with AI, the rate how they process data is so fast these days. It's very crucial to have that visibility, right? So I digress a little bit, but principle number 2 was create visibility. Principle number 3 is to have a strategy, right? Understand, because you don't want to panic, right? If you, let's say, you realize we have Pegasus exposure on our devices, you don't want to panic. You want to have a strategy in place. What happens when we detect spyware on our devices? What happens when a user doesn't have a device pin, right? What happens when we detect malware on our devices? Have that strategy in place. And then principle number 4 would be to create automation around that, right? Around your strategy. So basically, let's say if we detect spyware on our devices, then we want to isolate the device or from our infrastructure or something like that. And then there are tools, right? With our tool, it's very easy to build that integration with MDMs to automatically remediate or automatically activate some defense mechanisms to protect your users and your devices against all sorts of threats. And then principle number 5 would be to understand the laws in your region, right? Make yourself familiar with compliance regulations. I know there's the NIS2 regulation coming up right now. And compliance is always very annoying, but lawmakers spend a lot of time understanding technology and trying to design laws around that, right? So compliance, obviously, it's very annoying. Most of the time, the lawmaker doesn't really understand technology that well as we do, maybe. But the compliance gives you a good overview, right? It gives you a good indication what are the current technological trends. If you don't have the time, if you don't have the knowledge to know where to look for, I don't know, what was the latest exploits, right? What is the latest trend in technology or in security technology? Go and look at your compliance regulations. They give you a very good indication of where to look or what to look out for.
Mm-hmm. And how we can compare these statements to our to personal life, because that was for for companies. Exactly. How many of them do we have to use in our personal life?
It's very difficult, right? Because in your personal life, you don't have an IT administration, right? You don't have an IT department that can set up policies, can build automation around it, right? As a person, as a private person,
we are our own IT department.
Exactly, right? So if you want to translate these recommendations to your personal life, then it would be increase your awareness, right? Make sure that you have the latest operating system updates. Make sure that you update your applications regularly, right? Because OS updates are annoying, right? We get this notification. With application updates, we get notifications, but we swipe them away and they don't come back, right? So sometimes you fail to update or you forget about the existence of an app update. It's very important to regularly check for updates for your applications. And then be aware of attack vectors, right? Obviously, it's very difficult to keep up with the latest hacks and the latest exploits, but understand that attacks can come from devices, or from the platform itself. They can come from applications, from networks, and from phishing. If you didn't expect, a parcel from DHL, don't open a DHL email, right? Don't click on the link. With applications, make sure to understand what you're using the application for, right? If it is, a dating app, maybe it doesn't need your location. Maybe it doesn't need access to your phone book or something like that, right? You want to meet new people.
For photos, it has.
Exactly.
Łukasz, it's time for a surprise.
It's time for the last question.
Oh, Boże.
Yes. Imagine that. Imagine you become the head of ENISA, European Union Agency for Cybersecurity. What would you do? What the first thing would you do? Casual Fridays.
Oh,
something about cybersecurity. Yes.
Or maybe what would you recommend to the countries?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's actually, we spoke about how annoying compliance is, right? But the NIS2 effort, I personally find it a very, very good effort. Because if you look at NIS2, it is actually a very comprehensive guideline on how to build security for your company. And there's a reason why they put so much effort in it. The statistic right now is the criminal statistic that as a European Union, we are paying roughly 10 million euros every week on ransomware sums. The average ransomware case is around 300,000 to 500,000 euros, right? But on average, across the European Union, we're paying 10 million euros every week to adversaries for ransomware sums, which is crazy, right? It endangers our entire ecosystem and our day-to-day life, basically. So if you ask me, then I would probably try to enforce this with a little bit more sense of urgency, because right now, as it stands, as most national lawmakers look at it and say, it's very annoying. We have to do something with it. So they go with the bare minimum principle, right? They do whatever is necessary to tick that box. Okay, compliance, compliant, but then leave me alone, right? So that would be, one very high on my wish list. Another thing would be to increase awareness, right? To have more knowledge, general knowledge in the population, because the mobile device kind of was very sneaky how it was introduced in our day-to-day life, right? It was brand new technology. It was useful technology, right? We adopted it very, very quickly. If you think about it, the first iPhone was released in, I think, 2007, around that time, right? So not even 20 years ago. So if you think about it, right, it's barely a grown adult right now, the existence of mobile devices, right? But they became such an important, such an irreplaceable part of our day-to-day life. Think about what you would do if I would take away your phone right now. How do you
I will be naked, I think.
Right. It's
something like that.
And dating app, it's not a good idea.
So I think from a regulations perspective, provide more resources, right, for end users to understand what they're dealing with, right, to understand the technology better. So podcasts like yours, for example, are very, very important in that effort. But other than that, I think I wouldn't want to regulate too much, because regulation is, I would say it's inhibiting technological advancements, right? I would probably leave it as a free and open market, but try to, I think knowledge transfer would be my number one priority.
Okay, so our guest today was Yang Gyun-ro. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
That was a pleasure to have you.
Absolutely, yeah.
Dziękujemy serdecznie. I tak jak wspomniałem przed chwilą, naszym gościem dziś był Yang Gyun-ro z firmy Zimperium, i szczegóły dotyczące rozwiązań firmy Zimperium znajdziecie w opisie tego odcinka. Możecie je wykorzystać w rozwoju firmy, ale wspominaliśmy także dzisiaj o prywatnym życiu i o tym, jak się zabezpieczać także prywatnie. Łukaszu?
Nie zapomnijcie subskrybować nasz kanał. Znajdźcie też nas na platformach podcastowych Spotify, Apple Podcast, I do zobaczenia w kolejnych odcinkach.
Do zobaczenia. Dziękujemy.